We're so thrilled that you could come here, especially me. Everybody knows that I've talked about nothing for the past couple of weeks because this is a real coming of full circle for me. So what I'm going to do is I have 3 stories to tell you, and I'm going to try and keep them as succinct as possible because I know that you all want to meet Colonel Brazelton. The first story, it's about the Quilts of Valor Foundation. It was founded by Blue Star mother Catherine Roberts in 2003. Her son Nat was deployed in Iraq, and she had a vision of a young man on the side of the bed, hunched down, with the demons of war weighing heavily on him. And her second vision was that same young man with a quilt wrapped around him, and feeling the love, the comfort, and the healing side of the Quilts of Valor. And that's how she started the foundation. And it just grew from the first quilt that she did and grew by word of mouth across the country. We now have quilters all across the country. We have sister organizations in Canada, England, and Australia also who've gotten on board. And it's just our way of saying thank you for your service to our country. To date, the Quilts of Valor Foundation have awarded over 150,760 quilts. And here is a fun fact. 150,000 Quilts of Valor is the equivalent, nose to tail, ready to go, wings up, of 20,363 Air Force F-16s. Fun fact. The mission of the Quilts of Valor Foundation is to cover service members and veterans touched by war with comforting and healing quilts of valor. Okay, 2. I first became aware of the POW situation just a few years ago as a freshman in high school. Feelings, ladies, feelings. Elk Grove Village, Illinois was a long way away from the jungles of Vietnam, and I knew nothing of the dangers. And the way that we were asked to support POWs was through the purchase of a POW bracelet. The bracelets, for those who are not familiar with them, were first created in May 1970 by a California student group called Voices in Vital America with the intention that American POWs in Vietnam would not be forgotten. Those who wore the bracelets vowed to leave them on until the soldier named on that bracelet or their remains were returned to America. They contained the name and rank and the capture date of the American servicemen. Between 1970 and 1976, approximately 5 million bracelets were distributed. This is the one that I wore. It bears the name Captain Michael Brazelton, August 7th, 1966. The war started to draw down. Our servicemen and women returned from war, but this was a different time. There was no internet. So trying to find out whether Captain Brazelton made it back was impossible. I mean, the closest I had to an internet was my electric typewriter and my Funk and Wagnall set of encyclopedias. And believe me, they were not helpful. So eventually, I packed up my bracelet, put it in my memory box, and hoped for the best. Then a few years later, I moved into the Washington, D.C. area, and after the Vietnam Memorial went up, I took my bracelet, went down to the wall to see if your name was on it. I was happy to say it was not. But still, there was no closure. Still, there was no internet back then. So back into the box it went. As many of you know, I have become very into decluttering lately. And so once again, I opened the box. And I took out the bracelet, and this time, I knew what to do. I took it down to Jeff. I figured he knew people in the American Legion. He knew people in the Sons of the American Legion. You know, maybe they could help us find Captain Brazelton. 5 minutes later, the internet, he came upstairs to tell me that he was not only alive, but he was living right across the river in Virginia. So 10 minutes later, I was busy sorting through fabrics, thinking about designs, patterns, and I wanted to make sure that I had the quilt ready before I contacted him. So a few weeks later, once I had completed the quilt, I sat down and I wrote him a letter. Old-fashioned style, handwriting, letting him know who I was and what I wanted to do. He's obviously more into the internet than me because I got an email reply a few days later, which was wonderful. And, he accepted our offer to receive his Quilt of Valor after he completed his back surgery because he wanted to make sure that he was in good shape to receive it. And so now here we are today, coming full circle. 3. Michael Lee Brazelton was born in Los Angeles in 1942 and received his bachelor's degree in aeronautical engineering and entered the training school at Lackland Air Force Base on February 14, 1954. Captain Brazelton was one of the most decorated pilots of the Vietnam War. He volunteered for duty in Southwest Asia to gain more flight experience and return home with enough hours to apply for test pilot school. On August 7, 1966, Captain Brazelton was shot down in his F-105 Thunder Chief and was captured by the North Vietnamese and became a prisoner of war after flying 111 combat missions. He spent 2,402 days in captivity. He was released during Operation Homecoming on March 4, 1973. He received many awards and citations while interned as a prisoner of war. I'm just going to highlight a few of them. He received a Silver Star for gallantry in connection with military operations against an opposing armed force while serving with the 357th Tactical Fighter Squadron in Thailand on August 7, 1966. The citation read, Lieutenant Brazelton exhibited heroism involving risk of life while protecting the other members of his flight by attacking an anti-aircraft site which was delivering intense and accurate fire against the flight. He exposed himself for a protracted period of time in order to accurately determine which anti-aircraft site was the highest threat. By his gallantry and devotion to duty, Lieutenant Brazelton has reflected great credit upon himself and the United States Air Force. He received the Bronze Oak Leaf Cluster in lieu of a second Silver Star for gallantry in action in connection with military operations against an opposing armed force while a prisoner of war in North Vietnam. Ignoring international agreements on treatment of prisoners of war, the enemy resorted to mental and physical cruelties to obtain information, confessions, and propaganda materials. Captain Brazelton resisted their demands by calling upon his deepest inner strengths in a manner which reflected his devotion to duty and great credit upon himself and the United States Air Force. Captain Brazelton was awarded a third Bronze Oak Leaf Cluster in lieu of a fourth award of the Silver Star for gallantry in action in connection with military operations against an opposing armed force during June 1969, while held prisoner of war in North Vietnam. After a planned escape from the zoo camp, the enemy launched a massive torture purge attempting to gain prisoner secrets and propaganda materials. Tortured well beyond the normal threshold of pain, Captain Brazelton continued to resist the enemy. By his gallantry and devotion to duty, Captain Brazelton has reflected great credit upon himself and the United States Air Force. Captain Brazelton was awarded the Legion of Merit for his ceaseless efforts by a continuous showing of resistance to an enemy who ignored all international agreements on the treatment of prisoners of war in North Vietnam, demonstrated his professional competence, unwavering devotion, and loyalty to his country. Despite the harsh treatment through his long years of incarceration, he continued to perform his duties in a clearly exceptional manner which reflected great credit upon himself and the United States Air Force. Other awards include the Distinguished Flying Cross, the Prisoner of War Medal. After returning from Vietnam, Captain Brazelton continued his service and received the Defense Superior Service Medal for exceptionally superior service as Chief Military Liaison Office, Mexico City, United States Southern Command from June 1982 to July 1984. He then followed that up at the Industrial College of the Armed Forces in Fort McNair, Washington, D.C. from August 1984 to June 1985. And he continued his service with a variety of other positions until he retired as a colonel from the Air Force on October 31st, 1987. After retiring, he flew for American Airlines from 1989 to 2002. Truly, an extraordinary career of service and sacrifice, and from what he tells me, his girls are doing the same thing too. And so at this point, we would like to award you your Quilt of Valor. Captain Michael Brazelton, Air Force, on behalf of the Quilts of Valor Foundation, through the MSP Quilting Angels of Germantown, Maryland, in recognition of your service and sacrifice for this nation, it is a privilege to serve honor and comfort upon you through the award of this Quilt of Valor. Though we may never know the depths of your sacrifice to protect and defend the United States of America, as a gesture of gratitude from a grateful nation, we award you your Quilt of Valor.
Say something?
Yes, please do.
Okay. Well, unlike Kathy, I don't have anything written down or prepared. However, let me muddle through this. First of all, I've been looking forward to this for a long time, and I've been looking forward to meeting all of you ladies. That's why I much preferred to meet you here rather than have this presented at my home or someplace like that. So this is a real honor. This is an honor for me as well. A big honor. And I should point out that the bracelet is not the first one I received. Over the course of the first few years I was home, I received probably several hundred of these. Even now, like 45 years later, I still receive one or two a year. And I keep them all, and they're all valuable to me. It's the only jewelry I wear. Someday, I'm going to have, this is in my mind, I'm going to have a metal sculpture, put them all together into an eagle that's rising out of barbed wire with a broken chain around its neck, which is sort of the POW emblem. And I intend to make the bracelets the feathers. So eventually, this will become a very...
So you're telling me a lot of people found you a lot sooner than I did.
Yeah. Let's see. My friend Gloria, she's a professional artist. We're very close, and she was so interested to come with me to see what kind of work you did, because she is very interested in color and design and such as that. Let's see. I should say I was shot down on August the 7th, 1966. This last August the 7th, 2016, was my 50th anniversary of the day I was shot down. So I threw myself a really big party. I had my three daughters there, came in from various parts of the world, friends, neighbors, Air Force associates, and Navy. Some ex-POWs in the local area were there. local friends from a group that we dance with were there. So it was really nice. So that's 50 years. Seems like a dream. I think 50 years from the date I got out, which was March the 4th, 1973, I'm going to have another party. So, hopefully. I should say I was very lucky, regardless of what was written about me. I was very fortunate. I wasn't wounded when I bailed out. They weren't real happy with pilots that bombed their country, as you can imagine. But 7 years later, I survived. I had all my fingers and all my toes, reasonably good health. A few years later, I was fortunate to meet my future wife. I have 3 beautiful daughters. I've raised them to save the world. One of them's a captain in the Army, who is now overseas. Another girl is a federal law enforcement officer in Texas right now. And my youngest girl just came back from Barranquilla, Colombia, where she taught English at an all-girls school for a year. So anyway, things have worked out pretty well for me. And today makes it even better. And by the way, you'll see some of these pictures in my Christmas newsletter. So be prepared. Is there